All right, so we're going to go ahead and create new. And when we create new, we're going to go with our default resolution that we've been using for a while now, our 1920 by 1080 resolution of 150. This is going to be our default size for things that will fill a screen. This is your default size for a movie file or a video file that will fill a typical size computer screen or laptop screen or cell phone screen. We're going to use that and keep that size as we have. You probably have one of your little blocks over here probably already has that set up. You can click on it and go ahead and hit create. And now I've got this blank picture here. If you've been using the timeline for a while here, you probably have the timeline pop up at the bottom. If you don't, you can go ahead to Window and make sure you click on this timeline button here. I'm going to use my Control and 0 button to automatically zoom out to fill the whole screen. Now, if you don't have the Layers panel over here on the side, you're going to need the Layers panel to do this project, so make sure you go to Window and you have the Layers button here checkboxed as well. And Layer 1 should show up as Layer 1. It shouldn't say background, it should say Layer 1. I'm going to click Create Video Timeline. So that's going to create the timeline here at the bottom for me to use. Now, some of your pictures are probably landscape, meaning that they're sideways, filling the screen sideways. Some of your video pictures are probably vertical, the portrait orientation. Okay, I hate vertical portrait pictures, but you know that's probably the way some of you taking your pictures. So they're not going to fill the screen sideways the way that we'd like for them to. So we're going to have to get creative with this. We're going to start off with a single layer that fills the screen with a background color that's going to be there for our entire video. So that way when we have a vertical picture that pops in there, it's got some kind of a background that'll be default there for the entire video. So we're going to have that Layer 1 exist there. I'm going to rename it. I do that by coming over here and just double clicking on the name and giving it a name. I'm going to call it background color. And I get that now. I'm going to come over here to my paint bucket tool. If you don't see a paint bucket tool, what you probably see in place of it is this gradient tool here. To get that paint bucket tool, I simply hover over my gradient tool and I long press on it and I go over to the paint bucket tool right here. And I let go, and now I get the paint bucket tool. And pick a background color. I prefer black for the background, but white's just as fine. Don't go with a real poppy, crazy color. Go with something nice and default and simple, browns and grays and whites and blacks and something simple. But again, you're doing this for kids, so again, as I said in my intro here, in my intro for the project, be as creative as you like. I'm not going to take points off if you choose neon red. So pick a color that you like. Really, it's up to you. I repeat myself, I'm not going to take points off if you choose neon red. Pick a color that you like. I said in my intro to the project, be creative here, so choose what you want. I personally would prefer default simple colors, but this is up to you. It's your project. As long as you follow the requirements. Let's go back and take a look here. What are your requirements? You must do these 4 things. You must have all 26 photos in order. You must have transitions between each. You must have a text overlay for each photo teaching something about the letter. Make sure it's appropriate, folks. Appropriate, thanks. Okay. A is for apple, B is for baby, C is for cat, or whatever. I don't care what you use for each letter. It's entirely up to you as long as it's school appropriate. But A is for something, B is for something, C is for something, whatever. Do that for each. And then they must have music in the background. We're going to go over how to do each of those 4 things today over here in Photoshop. So pick a background color. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to do black. And I'm going to click. Boom. Layer 1, background color. Now it's black across the whole background of my video. Let's take a look at my default timeline length here. If I go down here to this section down here at the bottom. Come on. Now down here, this little slider always pops with that little thing when I come over it. This little slider here will zoom in and out on my timeline so I can see the whole thing. And right now, the length of my timeline is 05F. That is 5 seconds long. You need to kind of think about how long do you want this to be. You've got 26 pictures. And you might want to have a title slide at the beginning or something at the end. That's entirely up to you. I have no requirements for that. All you have to do, 26 pictures in order, text for each. So think about what you want here. For each picture, how long would you like that picture to be on the screen? 1 second for each. You want it a little longer? 2 seconds for each? Less than that? Think about it. I'm going to go with a second for each with a little bit of wiggle room. That gives me a 30-second total video. Does that sound about right? I'm going to go for a 30-second total video. 5 seconds isn't long enough. I'm going to have to grab the end of my background color here and drag it until I reach 30F. You see when I'm doing that where it says end and duration popping up? Do you guys see that? Right now it's at 13:15. I want to go until it's 30. So I'm just going to keep dragging here until it's 30. 24. 29. And then I'm going to keep dragging here until I get right around 30 seconds. It'll tell me there, a little pop-up, 30:02, 30:01. 30 seconds, that's what I want. Okay, so the background color is going to be there in the back there for the entire video. Now, some of my pictures will be landscape, some of them will be sideways, and that will cover up that background color, and that's fine. It's just there for when I need it. Let's scroll back. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put my audio track in too, so that's set up and it's working before I go ahead and pop any of my pictures in. So how do I add something to this? You notice the audio track's already there. The audio track's already there. And it's got nothing in it. There's no content to it. Now it works a little differently than the way that the rest of the tracks work. The rest of the tracks, as you've seen, work by connecting directly to the layers I have over here in my layers panel, right? And I add a layer, pops up down here, and I connect the two things directly. But the audio track works differently, right? So it's not going to connect over here. I can't really put sound in a video in a picture layer. So let's go down here, and do you notice the little plus signs here to the right of my tracks in my timeline? If I click plus, it's add audio to track. Take a look at that. If I hover over it, it says, come on. No, it's not going to do it. No. It did say add audio to track, I promise you. Let's go to my downloads, and let's note what my download was called. It was called Bensound Retro something MP3. So let's go find that in my downloads folder, because I know it was downloads. Mr. King has 1 billion downloads, but fortunately they're sorted by time here in mine. So I look for my Bensound Retro Soul MP3. I know that was Jaskiran's favorite soundtrack of all of them for sure, right, Jaskiran? And open. And it loads it right in there. Different color for sound. Sound's going to be green by default. Let me zoom out now a little bit on my timeline. You notice now my timeline has expanded. My background color goes to 30 seconds, but my soundtrack goes for as long as that music went for. It's like 3 minutes and 30 seconds or so. I don't really want my video that long. I decided my video should be 30 seconds, right? So I can grab this and drag it, and you notice it kind of snaps. You see it jumps in place there when it's the same length? I'm going to let it jump in place, same length, and then zoom back in using this little tool. This little tool down here at the bottom, by the way, is one of the most powerful things you guys have to use when you're working with your video timeline. It lets you zoom in and out, and lets you kind of keep track of where you're at. All right, so now right now, this is going to start right away, and it's going to end very abruptly here at the end. I have no idea where in my soundtrack this is. If I grab this, I can kind of find out. Let's go ahead and see. See here. It just kind of ends abruptly. Not really how I want my soundtrack to end. What would I prefer? I prefer a nice little fade out, right, of my music. We can do that here as well. So let's go ahead and set that up. I click this little button here. This gives me my settings right here. This little button at the end of my soundtrack gives me settings for my soundtrack. I get total volume for the soundtrack, a fade in, and a fade out. Let's see my starting of it. Do I want it to fade in, or do I like the way it starts? I kind of like the way it starts. I'm okay with that. Let's do a fade out of 3 seconds and see how that sounds. We'll come here near the end and play it and see how it sounds for a 3-second fade out. I like that. That feels pretty good. Don't you guys like that? Yep. 3-second fade out? I'm happy with it. All right. So now we got to start putting pictures in here. And I'm going to set things up before I start to make this work better for myself. Remember last time I talked about groups? Nope. Totally forget groups, huh? Cool. Let's do it. I come over here and I start putting my pictures in. I'm going to group things. I'm going to group all of my pictures into one group and all of my text into another one. So that way, when I try to add effects or move things around, I can find stuff easier. You're going to end up with 26 pictures and 26 layers of text. That's how many total layers? Come on, people, you have math. I don't have math class. I can do that. Nope. 26 and 26. Come on. 52. I was up since 5:30 in the morning, y'all. Come on. 26 and 50. That's 52 layers. That's way too many layers to try to dig through. So we're going to set this up properly. Let's go ahead and plop in a couple of pictures, and I'll show you guys how to make a layer group for your pictures to start with. So let's go ahead and plop those in. File. We're always going to go File, Place Embedded, because when you do that, that creates a new layer and lets you adjust the picture right away. You're pretty used to doing that. So let's go ahead and do that. File, Place Embedded. I'm going to go find my pictures. Well, whose choice was that? And I'm going to go ahead and do airplane pictures because I've got a bunch of those here. And I'm just going to randomly pick pictures because I don't have pictures of alphabet stuff like you guys have. So randomly paste pictures here. And I'm going to this. And you notice the picture does not fill the whole screen up. Your choice. Again, be creative the way you want to be creative. If your picture does not fill the screen, you have to center it. Can you right justify, left justify, whatever you want to do. Bounce it around, have it be up here, down here. Do what you want to do. Remember, this is for kids. Have fun with it. Do what you think looks good. All right? I'm actually going to left justify this one. And then hit this. Do you notice how those purple lines show up to help me line things up? If I want it centered, that line shows up telling me, hey, it's centered now, helping me see where things are. Here. So you need to rotate things, you're saying. When you hit Place Embedded, you notice how it comes in with these tools for me to resize it and whatnot right off the bat? I'm literally showing it to you right now. These tools here on the outside, these little handles, it comes in with that automatically when I import the picture with Place Embedded. Well, if I come outside of one of these corners, just outside of it here, you notice what I get? Can you see that? The little rotate tool? Absolutely, you can. You do what you need to do. You know how to rotate pictures. Okay, so do what you need to do. I'm going to bring this guy over here, stick it there, and hit the checkbox, and now my picture is where I want it to be. I have the picture over here. Now, I'm probably going to want to rename these. You'll probably want to rename them for the letters they are, so you can find them. A, B, C, whatever. Let's go ahead and just call this with A. All right. File. Place Embedded. Next one. Let's go ahead and stick it up here, drag it out, put that one over here, checkbox, call it B. Now, let's look down at my timeline. A and B are both down here. These were given their own layer within the timeline, and they're both default like 5 seconds or so in length. Let's zoom in on them so I can see what I'm working with. I decided I wanted each of my layers to be a second long. Let's start off with adjusting that. We're going to adjust A to be 1 second. And then B, be 1 second. And then we'll slide B to start as soon as A is done. Now I've got 2 picture layers. as soon as I have 2 picture layers, I can create my group. I want to do that right away so that I can continue to add pictures to that group as I go, so I can be organized. Some of us struggle with organization and get very, very lost. I promise you, the sooner you start thinking about organizing these things, the better this will go for you. So let's select both of these. If I come back over here to my layers panel, and if I hold down my control key and I click both layers and have them both highlighted, I can then go up to my layers panel up at the top here, and I can come down here about halfway, and you notice I have an option here for group layers. Now, over my layers panel, they're now called group 1, and in my timeline, they're also called group 1. If I don't do this, I'll have 52 layers vertical in my timeline, taking up a massive amount of space and being very difficult for you to find anything. Please don't do that. Please. Listen to Mr. King. He's done this before. Okay? Now, let's name group 1. You double click on the name, and we're going to call this photos. Okay? If I want to adjust any of my photos, I come down here and I expand this, and I'll see them both. You see how I click on that button right there? And I can expand that, and I can move them around. Let's add one more. I'm not going to do 26 today. I'm going to add one more, then I can show you how transitions work, and then we'll add some text, and I'll show you what I can do with text too. Okay? So I'm going to come over here and expand photos over here. Make sure photos is selected. My group is selected. I go to File, Place Embedded. Pick one more picture. Now, do you notice it did not come in my photos group? Do you see that? So what am I going to do? I'm just going to drag it into photos. Call it C. And now it's within the group. I close the group. It's tucked up in there. And then I'm going to take photos, or C, and I'm going to drag it down to 1 second. How do I know it's 1 second? Well, I have 2 ways of seeing that. I can line it up with the 1 second mark up at the top of the timeline. Do you see that? I also can see it on the little black pop-up that shows up there where it says end 1, duration 1. That tells me it's 1 second long. And I'm going to drag it here, and it's going to snap at the end of B. Okay. Now I've got my A, B, C in order. That makes sense to you guys? Let's toss a few transitions in there. Transitions are within this little button right here next to my scissors. We can do crossfade, fade with black, fade with white, fade with color. I'm going to show you each of those. Let's do a fade first between A and B. I drag it over the picture that I want it to affect. I can just click on drag from fade to here, and you see I get the little black box there? I'll let go. Let's look what happens if that's all I do. That's all I do. Let's watch what happens if I drag this over. A will fade out. B pops up. That's a transition of sorts, right? What would I prefer to happen? I prefer A to fade out, B to fade in, right? What would we call that? Well, I could do that 2 ways. I can do what I just did there, and then I can also drag this over here for B, and then A will fade out, B will fade in, right? But another way to do that, that's one fades out, the next fades in. That's more subtle, right? One fades out, it's going away, and then as that one's completely away, the next one starts to come in. You understand how that works? The crossfade, the two do the same thing at the same time. Drag a crossfade, come on. Why is crossfade not working for me here? Come on. Okay, crossfade. Oh. So crossfade will only work if you put the two things in the same line. So note what I have to do here. You see how these each have their own line? It gives you a little more flexibility. I have to drag them down. You see what I can do here? I can grab them and drag them down to their own little line here. And then I can do crossfade. And you see that puts the black box between both of them? And it's a little more complicated looking there, but watch this. This does a little thing where the one fades out while the other one fades in at the same time. And they're kind of overlaying each other. You see that? It's a little bit of a different kind of transition. So it depends on what you like. You want one to fade out while the other one's fading in, or one fades out, then the other fades in. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. Fade with black, fade with white, fade with color are exactly the same as fade, except instead of just fading to whatever you have in the background, they fade to what they say they're fading to. Fade to a black in the background, fade to a white in the background, fade to a color. So for example, if I bring this down, not really what we're going for, but under some circumstances it might be. So let's do what I did to begin with here. I'll bring a fade down here and a fade down here. Note if I zoom in nice and close so I can actually see these, I can adjust my fades the same way as I can adjust my actual layers individually. If I come to the ends here, I'm given those same little brackets, and I can drag these to affect the duration of a fade. Do I want that fade to last for a period of time and be a long and extended fade, or a short one? So watch, I have a short fade for A, and I'll make B be a real long fade. There. So you can affect the lengths of those fades. Don't spend a ton of time dragging around and messing with your fades, but you have to have some kind of transition between each of your layers, each of your pictures. Choose something, be consistent, keep it simple. Okay? Keep it simple, be consistent with what you want to do with your transitions, but have some way you transition between each of the different pictures that you have. Don't just jump from one to the next. Okay? Now, let's go ahead and close up this photos. The next thing we have to have is some kind of text. Okay? Let's go ahead and start adding some text. To add text, I just add a new layer. And I'm actually going to pull that out of my photos here. Put it up above. And I want this to be A is for whatever. What is A for, Jaskiran? What's A for? A is for apple. Okay, A is for apple. Pick a font, whatever you want the font to be, whatever you like. But keep it consistent. Pick a size, make it big, make it readable. Okay? And put it where you want it to be. Pretty close, yeah, honestly. Now I want my A is for apple text to be at the same place where my A picture is. I want it so that A is for apple shows up while the A picture is there. See? Let's add another new layer. And this one, I'm going to type B is for what? What's B for? B is for ball. B is for ball. Okay? Click that where I want it to be. Let's put it down here. Okay? I want this to be same location as the B one is, right? And I add a third one. C is for cat, she says. All right. C is for cat. Okay, I put that one same location as my C. Thank you. It's a really pretty C, isn't it? It's like a C you'd want to swim in, isn't it? I know you were. I'm with you. See, same wavelength. I'm in. I'm in. I'm going to real quickly here do two more things, and then I'm going to play it. Yes. So I'm going to select all of these. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to group these under layer. I'm going to group layers. I'm going to call this text. Okay. So I got my text and my photos, and I can expand each one individually when I want to do things to them. You don't have to have any kind of transitions between your text if you don't want them. You can if you want them. It's up to you if you want to do transitions between text. One thing I will recommend, if you find your text is unreadable, we can add some layer effects. I'll show you that in a minute after I play it for Anna here. I've managed, I think, to make it so that my text is in locations on my pictures where it's readable. If you can't do that, there are two different layer effects I can add using the grouping method here I showed you to make it so that all your text will be readable no matter where it is in the picture. I'll show you that in a minute. But here, just for you, Anna, let's go ahead and play it. There you go. All right, so now to make the layer effects for text, two things that we're going to do. We can add a drop shadow, and we can add a stroke, which is a line around the text that's a different color. It makes it pop a little bit more. So let's go ahead and go to my text folder here. Under my layers, over here, I'm on the side. I'm going to right click and go to blending options. It brings this panel up. And I want two things. I want my drop shadow, and I want stroke. You're going to see them pop up on here once I do it. Let's start with the stroke, because the stroke's a little bit more subtle. Drop shadow is a little bit different, and I'll show you both things. Let's start with stroke. I click the checkbox next to it, and it pops up. Do you see the difference? The stroke just adds a nice little line around it, making it a little bit more obvious. If I select next to the word stroke, I actually get my options here. And the default options should be close to the best options based on your text font size and everything else, but you can play with them. You can make your size for your stroke bigger, but you make it bolder. Too much is too much, but a little bit bigger maybe is better for what you're doing. Let's go ahead and turn our stroke off now. Let's take a look at drop shadow. Drop shadow adds a little bit of a layer behind your text that is like a shadow behind it. So take a look at the text without drop shadow and watch when I click the checkbox. Just it kind of pops off the page just a little bit. And then over here, three things I like to play with over here. One is my angle. Watch, right now it's 90. If I type 45 in here, I feel like that gives it just a little bit of a better effect. Distance and size are the two other things. Keep them between 2 and 6. So 2 right now is a very subtle effect. You'll notice it. Watch, I uncheck it. I check it. You notice that it happened. If I do, say, 4 on both distance and size, we now notice it a little more, right? 6 is almost too much. But it still looks okay, right? Any more than 6 is too much, really, for this sort of effect that we're doing here. So between 2 and 6 is probably your best bet for this sort of effect. And you can combine them if you really need your text to pop off the screen. We can do a stroke and a drop shadow. And trust me, it will show up on every background you could possibly have it on. Let's try and play it now. There's no way you're not seeing that text on every background you put it on. You do both a stroke and a drop shadow. All right, so things that we've done today, we've added our photos, we've added our text, we've done transitions between photos, and we've done layer blending effects for our text. We've also grouped our text and our photos in groups. We've also added a background color for when our photos don't fill the screen. Any questions about any of those things? Reminder, your requirements are all 26 photos in order, a transition between each of them, a text overlay for each photo lined up with the photo teaching something about that letter, and music in the background taken from our Ben Sound site here. Questions? Any issues? Yeah. You must absolutely take it from that site, yes. It must be from that site for this project. Yes, ma'am. Other questions? I do not trust any other royalty-free sites for this project. I do not trust that you know what royalty-free means. Of course. All right. Thank you so much for sticking along and playing with us.
Until next class.